All right, good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. Happy Friday in May. My name is Douglas Nelson. I'm principal here at Wootton High School, and we are here for the final principal coffee chat of the school year. Very hard to believe. So the way we usually structure our coffee chat time is there are questions generally submitted in advance, and we usually begin with those questions. I'll share them aloud and then respond to those so the group can know what question is asked and hear the response that is provided. And then we open it up for questions to be shared in the chat or for someone to come off mute and just ask that question directly. So this morning, we do not have any questions submitted in advance, so we don't have to start there. So today we're just going to have an open forum to see if there are any questions that you would like to ask or you're just curious about. So I'm going to give everyone just a little time to think about that, and we'll monitor the chat and see if there are any questions that you have for today. And while everybody is possibly thinking of some questions, Jessica, I see your video on. You might have a question to ask. So let's go ahead and do that.
I do, if you don't mind.
Go for it, please.
I actually sent an email a little while ago, but I figured I'd just bring it up here too. Two things I wanted to ask about. One is not, and this is for next year, not all sports teams got professional photos. And so I wanted to see if that's something that you all could make sure that all sports teams and clubs get that for the future. My daughter was on varsity handball, and there was no, she was on JV softball, and she got JV softball pictures. And then I realized, I was like, the handball team never had photos taken. And I know it's a smaller team, but it's still an activity at the school. And so just one suggestion would be just to make sure that any and every club, sports or clubs too, have nice photos taken, because the kids put a lot of effort and time in, and it's just a nice, thing to have.
Yeah, and Jessica, I remember your email. So can we start with that one and then we'll move on to the second one?
Yeah, perfect.
One question for you first. Have you had a chance to talk with Al Lightsey or talk with our athletic director at all?
No, I don't know who he is, so
Okay.
I'm happy to reach out to him.
Or you already have, you reached out to us. So
Okay.
I feel like that is definitely the next step that we want to make, just
Okay.
because our athletic specialist, our athletic director is with all teams, right? And
Okay.
so he is the one that kind of has a sense about how they're all structured. I cannot tell you directly whether I know we have professional photographers for each of our teams. What I know I have observed is you have individuals with far more talent in taking a photograph than myself present at athletic events. Like you can see that there are individuals taking those. I don't know if we've hired them or how they're attached to those teams, but I believe it's, as you said, it's not at all of them, right? So I think that's a really great question to take back to Mr. Lightsey. So I'll be sure to do that. And then we'll see what he says about photographs being taken, right?
Okay. Great.
Jessica, one thing I wanted to say to you all, and I think it's just good information to start getting out there. I do know that MCPS system-wide is looking at handball. And so they might be looking, sometimes they'll shift some sports based on what they think the interest will be. So they are considering options out there. Handball may or may not be back, right? They might be considering pickleball or something like that. And I just kind of wanted to plant a seed that athletics has talked to high school principals about which sports they might be looking at going into next year. And that's one of them.
That's
and
interesting.
If it's not handball, then it might be bocce, but they're feeling around in that space. Okay.
Great.
Right. And what was the second part of your question?
So the second question was, I wanted to ask about the theater program. Because the theater program, this was also an email from before, the spring musical overlaps with two seasons, winter and spring. And I know that you all are trying to build up the theater program, but The theater practice time is the same time as other after-school activities for those 2 winter and spring activities. It falls right in the middle of both, and so for a student to do the theater, they have to give up 2 activities to do that 1 theater program. They have to give up a winter sporter club and a spring sporter club to be able to do the spring musical. So I didn't know if it was possible. And again, this is, just a suggestion to maybe move it to either only spring or only winter, because then your students are only giving up 1 activity to then, it's a 1-to-1 trade-off as opposed to 2. And then the other thing to think about, and this just might be the nature of all the activities for theater, is that it's at the same time as directly as after school as sports and other clubs, which means that any athlete is not going to be able to participate in the theater program because they overlap, and vice versa. A theater kid is not going to be able to participate in a sports activity. That just might be the nature of the beast. But I know that we're trying to build up the Wootton Theater program, and it's so wonderful and such an important piece of our community. I didn't know if there are ways of kind of working it so that we can make it more accessible to the students to participate in the theater program.
Right. Yeah, Jessica, I think you bring up a really good one, right? And I think I'll start with like kind of where my heart is. I really want students to have the most access to what they can be involved in. And I was in theater when I was in high school. And I remember some of like the basketball students, right? I remember being in Little Shop of Horrors, and like my dentist, like he was on the basketball team, and it was a really delicate balance of like how he squeezed all of that in, but he was able to make it work, right? And that's ideal. And I start with that because sometimes you can make these things work, but there's a lot of times where it's a real challenge to do so. And I think it would be a particularly hard shift to move where we place large performances like that in a school as programmed and as busy as Wootton to make it all work. So I think it's possible you can shift a spring musical, let's say, to a fall musical, and maybe not have to lose 2 activities. But in making a move like that, facilities really start to come into play here. And so our auditorium is very much reserved and programmed up based on when we know student groups need to perform. So you might think, well, let's shift that musical to another time when winter sports wrap up. So you could do winter sports and go right into spring musical. But what the music department will say, well, no, that's not when our concerts are set up. Like, we need to do our concerts at that time. And then they can't be in the same auditorium space. We have a whole scheduling. It's amazing how intricate it is. Yeah. So I start by saying that I think it's a really good suggestion, and I think that it has a lot of challenges in how the school is set up and structured. The group, though, to take it to, right, would be those either the coaches or Dr. Lazarus for his thoughts, right? Because I know that our staff have really given this a lot of thought. So I want to make a recommendation. Like, there are people at the school, I think, for both of the points that you've brought up. One is Mr. Lightsey, and I think the other is Dr. Lazarus, just to give their thoughts and see if there's anything we can do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for asking those.
Sure.
Okay, so we have two chat items. I'll go ahead and read these to you, and then we'll go ahead and talk through them. So, Mr. Nelson, congratulations on almost completing your first year at Wootton. Thank you very much. You mentioned when you first arrived that you would be doing a lot of observing and listening to start. Now that you almost have your first year under your belt, can you share with us your vision for Wootton for the next year and any changes you want to make, or any thoughts you can share at this point? So yes, this has very much been on my mind. I think very timely question to ask right about now. So I'll start by saying the first year was a lot of listening to know and understand about Wootton. It's very interesting. Right before I was coming into this meeting, we were doing prom logistics for tomorrow. It's going to be a wonderful night with our students at prom. And while I've done a prom before, I haven't done one at Wootton. It's just very emblematic of where to start, is to listen to a lot of the intentional work that's been done here about how prom works here. So having that year under my belt of really listening to understand about how the school works, some things that are on my mind about the school for next year. First, when it comes to the vision, I'm still very much where I was at the start of all of this. I really believe that Wootton, vision-wise, its strength is that it offers a place in where students are academically challenged and they belong. And I believe belonging is that place that we will be spending some time with going into next year. So something that's kind of a little bit more immediate. On Monday, we'll be convening as staff to talk about something that the superintendent has been sharing and our students have been saying here at Wootton, which is, sometimes they feel that like hateful language gets said or things that make them feel really uncomfortable in their school space. Doesn't happen a lot, but we know that it happens. And as MCPS is really looking at this, I feel like Wootton needs to look at this. And we're going to start to do some of our work to make sure that students have a way to tell us if something really isn't working, or they feel like someone says something that makes them uncomfortable, that an adult is working with them to support them. And that gets back to belonging. So we're going to do some immediate work around that. And I also think that going into next year, MCPS is working with schools on really taking a look at what type of intentional planning we do. And they're really, simple terms, I feel like kind of asking us to up our game. So teams were meeting just yesterday to take a look at what our school improvement process is next year. And we're really going to be leaning in on school improvement plans that really set a literacy goal and a math goal to make it clear where we want our students to go with their learning and how teachers are going to teach them. And we also have culture and equity goals about how we create a school that's doing work to make it a more inclusive place where belonging really matters. So for right here and kind of that bridge into next year, where May is eventually going to become August, those are the things that are on my mind right now. And I really look forward to doing that work because although the school closes during the summer, leaders are hard at work. Our resource teachers, our administrators, the members of the instructional leadership team are coming together throughout the whole summer to get all of this work done and get ready for pre-service when we welcome everyone back. So Sally, I hope that paints a little bit of a picture of what was in your question. And thank you for asking that. So got a question from Allison. Thanks for asking. And you say, can you please provide an update on staffing for the 23-24 school year and the impact on curriculum? Yeah, I can provide you an update. So MCPS, a really good place to begin, kind of a home plate to begin, is each year schools are allocated staffing based upon student enrollment projections. And so for Wootton over time, our enrollment, it has been going down. Currently, at least as of last week on Thursday, we had 1,921 students enrolled at the school. And our projection going into next year is around 1,860. So we have a drop off of some students. And then our enrollment tends to come a little under the actual projection. So our staffing going into next year, this means that we had a staffing reduction. We will not have the same number of staff coming in the building as we had this year. So we have worked through that and we've made some adjustments, but for the curriculum impact, I think parents just need to know that there are some programs, some courses that the school wanted to offer. We at least had some students that wanted to take those courses, but we were not able to offer them because the numbers were not high enough to run the actual course. And so what happens in that case, so we've had a few courses like that we had to cut. So the counselors will bring students down, explain that, and they'll be asked to select another course. There'll be another option for them. But I'll share one where a reduction in staffing kind of impacts the school. I'll give you a tangible example. Earlier this year in November, the College Board, AP, came out to our school to present to a number of counties in Maryland about their programs and options for students. And of course, one of those is the AP African American Studies course. And we have a very robust program, and the option was given as to whether schools were going to be able to pilot that course. But with a reduction in staffing, for example, that is not an option for us, something we want to do, but yet we're not able to do because we do not have the staffing to move that course forward. So it's a little bit disappointing, but that is the reality of how staffing works. And just one other note on your question, Allison, is schools can request additional staffing. I have requested additional staffing based on what I think needs are within the school. If I see some classes that are running really high, we'll ask for additional staffing from central office. Same thing with that AP African American course that I just mentioned. I'd still like to do it if it's possibly an option. So we can request additional staffing. I have made that additional staffing request to central office and have not heard back as to whether we have that additional staffing. And I think there's a really clear reason probably why, and that is in the headlines of the news, and that is that the county council and the school system itself has not finalized their budget. So until we really know where the actual dollars fall, then we may not have movement until we get there. So I remain hopeful that we will get some additional staffing to come back to the school. Allison, if there's anything else you wanted me to speak to, follow up in the chat and let me know, or looks like you might have come off mute.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Here's one from Jack. I wonder what time the senior graduation ceremony on May 31st will end. So it should take us 2 hours. And we pretty much have to stick with that time in our planning, Jack, because it won't be that, it's not the case for us, but we have to plan as if it's possible another school will come in after us. So 2 hours is what I would plan on. And I think it's very likely we will be right there. So no questions currently in the chat. If anyone would like to pop off mute and ask a question, please feel free. Or the chat is still open if you would like to put a question in there. Everybody's possibly thinking, I did want to just give a little plug. Next week is our celebration of the arts on Wednesday and Thursday, starting at 6:30. So there are events planned on 2 days. If anybody would like to come by and see all of the art and just the many things within our amazing arts department that gets produced in a year, there'll be some performances to come see, creations that have been made by the students. So if you would like to come by and you want to spend some time in the arts, that will be next week on Wednesday and Thursday.
Actually, may I ask another question while we're waiting for other
Please.
questions?
Mm-hmm.
My son's in the marching band, which is a big, well, I call it a big group within the school, and loves it. And I know that a lot of the instruments and harnesses and things are like many years old. And from what Ms. Eckerly has said is that schools that are being redone get lots and lots of like brand new instruments and everything. Is there any way that, you know, anything can be done in terms of requests to the county for those schools like Wootton, who are not, you know, a fancy redone school, you know, to get funding for things like falling apart harnesses, which happened to my son, who, you know, his tenor drum went down and he caught the drum, but, you know, it meant the harness is falling apart. So they would have to fix it before each, you know, performance. So, you know, I know that money is given a lot of times to athletic programs. And, you know, is there a way to request or advocate for money to be also given, you know, to things like the marching band program?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Allison. First of all, I would just say, I wish that arts and something like band, I wish it was funded like athletics, in which there was this regular amount of money that directly comes back to schools, in which it's very clear what it is to be used for. because that does happen for athletics. We get an allocation of funds that come multiple times throughout the year, and it's just very clear what it is to be used for. So any advocacy in that regard, I think would benefit us at the school. When it comes to actual instrument replacement, I think that Ms. Eckerly is correct in the way that she describes it. Schools that do have a facility upgrade, there is this kind of like one-time opportunity in which you have just new equipment and furniture and an influx of things that come into the school like that. But schools also have the responsibility of keeping up with their needs over time, whether they're a new building or not. So there are certainly different approaches that are out there in the county. The school that I was at before this held an annual fundraiser through their arts department, in which all of the money that was raised in that fundraiser went directly back to things like purchasing new instruments. That was its purpose in fundraising for the arts. And then there, of course, you can replace through purchasing. It's just instruments are wildly expensive things.
Yeah.
So, generally what you're working with is an immediate need. And if you have an immediate need of a couple instruments that break, that really can take what you've budgeted for straight out, and just replacing those, let's say a tuba that got dropped, and that dropped tuba, it really can't be used, right? So you have this large expense of cash that goes right out. So it is a real challenge, is what I would say on this topic.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll also just add that Patrons of the Arts does try to help with this stuff through their fundraising. And I know that sometimes the PTSA has split costs with Patrons of the Arts for things like this. I can't remember which type of instruments, but I know Ms. Eckerly was able to find, I think, like a good deal on a couple of instruments this past year, and we went in with them to help. So sometimes too, like to the extent that it's possible, patrons and the PTSA help with that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question here from Robin Shapiro, which is, any thoughts on providing an online absent from Parent View or another venue? So Mr. Shapiro, if I could ask, would you be willing to tell me a little bit more about that, starting with this idea? One thing Wootton put into place this year is just the straight up email, which is attendance at Wootton High School, like that you can just kind of load and send your attendance note in through an email. Could you tell me a little bit more about that online venue that you're looking for, or how that could kind of assist us here at the school?
Okay, so my understanding right now is that you have to print out the form and then you have to send it in with your kid, or you can scan it and send it back, which still involves printing out the form, writing it out, and then pushing it back to you. Why not just provide purely an online, either a fillable PDF or something where you don't have to go and print stuff out to send it back? Just a green alternative where it's an authenticated thing that proves to you that I did sign it somehow, and either through a message through Parent View would accomplish exactly the same thing as printing the form and sending it via email. But you don't have to. The problem is you have to go print things out, and then remember that the kid either has to take it or you have to send it back. But this way you're in one system.
Yeah, I think that I definitely hear the proposal. I'll start with Parent View, because if you were working on Synergy, then you would be logged in and we would see it's your profile. It's definitely coming from you. So I get that. And then the issue with Synergy and Parent View is at Wootton High School, we don't control that. So that comes out of our technology office. So we sometimes propose, but they have to look at it, essentially approve it. It generally is system-wide. It certainly takes some time. So it's not something you can move forward like that email address that we have. We could make that request from our school directly. So it functions a little bit different in that regard, but possibly they could do it. When it comes to the Google form, I think the thing that worries me about that is that students would just use it and pretend to be their parent. And they might be submitting the Google form without their parents' knowledge. of their absence, which that is what that note is intending to do. Someone gives whatever the form is, they're giving it a visual assessment. And if it throws them off, like our attendance then sends that note to an administrator, or calls to verify it. So the Google form, my thinking would be around how we could still make sure that it was definitely coming from parents.
Google form will work just fine.
Well, could you what if a student logged in and pretended to be you, Mr. Shapiro? Like, what if someone filled it out pretending to be you?
What if they send an email pretending to be me? Same thing.
But did you share with me that it was you attached the form to the email when you send it in?
Yeah, but they could just write it in just like me anyway.
That's right.
Right.
They can, right? But I'm trying to paint the picture. That is something that I know an adult at school is kind of giving a visual assessment. And I definitely have received forms when you get back where you can see an adult's like, I don't believe that was done by the actual parent. I think that that's a student kind of faking that. And I think Google form might be a little harder, but I could possibly be wrong there.
That's why I suggested Synergy or Parent View or something where you see me logged in, or an email with the fillable PDF. I mean, there's plenty of ways to sign things now, like a DocuSign form or something like that.
Yeah, and I will just say one other, I'll take these ideas back and get a sense from our attendance office what they think about them. The one thing though, I will say, just want to elevate this, and Roman does not apply, it does not sound applicable to you. I think one thing we will always have to have, however, for a public school is a form option. Because for some, like, that is the only way they're going to be able to let us know, or they just need to like walk right in the school and fill out a form, because technology is not necessarily an option, or they're not going to have a signable PDF option to submit something. So the form might always be around, but let me take the idea of the Synergy back to the attendance office and see if possibly it might be even looked at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So got from Margaret, and that is, what is your assessment about teacher morale at Wootton? What can be done to help and boost morale? I'll start, Margaret, with just a thought. As an educational professional, I probably would feel this way regardless of my position. And I do think that we are at a bit of a crisis level right now. It seems like I'm just concerned as someone that hears all the reports that we don't have as many individuals going into this profession, that the numbers are way down in teacher prep programs and individuals. It's not just that we have, and this is not just at Wootton, you hear this system wide, that is not just that staff are moving on to another building to teach, or maybe they're going to another place to remain a teacher. I mean, we have teachers that are leaving the profession. And so I think that is really worrisome. So I want to start there. That is a bigger picture, larger than Wootton. I really feel like as a society, there's something that we need to work on. When it comes to morale and our school specifically, I just want to share, Margaret, we're about to take a look at that in two ways. So each year at Wootton, the instructional leadership team, we're going to assess with some questions about how teachers feel, what they're thinking about the culture and climate within the building, and ask some specific directions to get what we kind of call the street data, the feel of what's going on. And that process is being developed right now. End of the year, I think, is also a really good time to do that, so you can use it with your summer planning. Another thing that is returned this year is there's contract language in MCPS that there is a climate survey sent out to staff annually, and it really wasn't there for a bit during the pandemic, and it's come back this year. So staff right now are completing what is a consistent set of questions, and they'll answer on behalf of their experience here at Wootton. And then that data will come back to me so that we can look at it as administrators and as the leadership team. So I'm really interested to see how those questions play out. And I think that those surveys can be very helpful, because for some staff, they really they do a good job of advocating, or they come by your office often to explain, like, this is a real drag, Doug. Like, we don't really like this part of something that's going on. I'll share an example. Teachers still feel like students are oftentimes in the hallway, and they are out there maybe too long, and they're not giving kind of that seriousness, the purpose, like during the academic class, you need to be there as much as possible. So we know that, but others may not see that as a concern, and surveys can help us sometimes see that. So my point to this, Margaret, is we have a number of gears turning right now to look and see where we are with climate culture and the general morale in the building, so that then we can work on it. So we're doing that right now. So Jessica, I see one. This question is, I understand that there is a special orientation for senior parents at back to school night, but should we also expect information to start coming to us over the summer about what to expect? Jessica, can I ask a clarification? Expect for that parent meeting at back to school night, or just like the general broad things that parents of seniors need to know?
More about the general things parents.
The general stuff, right? Try just giving this a little think time. So you are correct, and I just want everyone to know that there is a senior parent meeting that really kicks things off, and that does happen at back to school night right before the formal activities begin. And it is a really big, broad picture of what to expect your senior year. Ms. Markowitz and the senior administrator present that. When it comes to information, it is possible, Jessica, I would say it's possible that there are some updates that come your way. It is my plan this summer to give like that mid-summer update. And then of course, there's like a welcome back letter. And I think there is some information in that welcome back letter specifically to seniors, but there won't be too much more than that. And then I think that back to school night, that's the one I would recommend you really pay attention to.
Thank you. I was just asking because several people have other conflicts, and those meetings are usually on Thursday nights, which is a very busy activity night. And so it was, how much do we need to reorganize our lives to make sure we can attend that evening?
Last year, I believe we recorded it. So if I remember, we had like a computer that was kind of filming us. So if not, that would be something I would look at too, in case you can't make it. That is definitely a recording of information I think would be beneficial for people to have.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, Ali Covey, good one. Chat GPT. Okay, so how is the English department, especially, and others too, I'm sure, dealing with Chat GPT? I hear a little more actually from the tech teachers in this regard, and their work on kind of trying to oversee how to work with this. So the teachers have done some good advocacy. I will share with you right up. This one, I'm paying attention to this one only because I feel like I have so much to learn and try to how to try to work with this. Ali, what I would say for you directly, I collected some information from at least one teacher who was really working on this, and then took it back to central office, and I felt heard from them. I think they are very aware. I think that it is one of those things where at least some guidance needs to be provided from the school system. I know that they're looking at like what kind of controls do they want in place for access when you're actually here in a building and accessing that platform. Teachers are trying to find ways to identify if it's being used. I've heard from some of the leaders, and I think that this is kind of the pragmatic point that we do want to go, which is we need to control for it, as we need students to be demonstrating those critical thinking skills of developing whatever it is we want them to develop, whether it's written work, let's say in English, whether it's code and technology. We need to know that they have those skills, but to just outright ban it does not seem to be the right idea. When I think that there are some things that you can gain from utilizing it as possibly a benefit to instruction. So it seems like the technology is in that space working on it right now. So the role that I'm trying to fulfill is a provider of information, advocate a little bit to get that information to those in the system that are looking at this. So that is where I would say we are with Chat GPT. Roman, thank you for the example of the Walter Johnson form. I'll take a look at that. And Alec, do I know back to school night date right now for next year? Let me check. So Ali, I don't see it yet, but generally, historically, Wooten has done this the first week of school, like we're very early school. So I would hold a date right before Memorial Day or right after Memorial Day. Generally what happens, at least in our cluster, the high school sets the date and then we go a little early so that then there's that trickle down effect so that the middle schools and the elementaries can set after that, because clusters, when we're scheduling our date, just a little background here, needs to be coordinated so that parents can attend all the back to school nights and that we're not in conflict within our cluster. We try to avoid that. So don't have a date yet, but that's at least a little time frame of when back to school night would be. So here's one thing I enjoyed at Wooten was 2 back to school nights. Thoughts? This is my last year and PTSA meeting at Wooten. Thank you, everyone. That's very nice for that. So 2 back to school nights. I know some schools do this as the case with many things, and I have not done this at Wooten. I also want to be upfront with this, but I've been at schools that have looked at the 2-night back to school night, and there are benefits and there are costs with this as well. So the 2 nights, I think that there are some wins in the fact that it's not so overcrowded. It's maybe not as frantic with so many people in the building. Whereas 1 night, you come in and you kind of get that all done in one evening, but spreading it out. Here's the one thing I do want you to think about the 2 nights of back to school night. Teachers, by contract, can only attend 1 back to school night. So there is, when you separate them out and have the 2-night approach, there will be times in which parents will not be able, so the teacher's going to have to pick. If it's 1 night that more of their classes are attending, like you have to be a little more coordinated. You might not get your exact child's teacher because you have to pick 1 night or the other. And it's generally based upon, let's say, if you separate by grade level, the most students that you would have in, let's say, upper grade would attend on 1 night. So I just wanted, there's some logistics about that 2-night approach, but it's a great suggestion. So what I'll do is I'll at least open up the door, take that back, and maybe talk with the administrative team for their thoughts about whether that's an option. So here's a question we've done. Let me see. This question we have addressed at all of our meetings since the February principal coffee chat. And this one is update on investigations, where perpetrators determined, are there any plans for additional security cameras to assist in investigating such incidences? Okay, so Sal, I would actually start with that the last part of your question, which is plans for additional security cameras to assist in the investigations. So would I welcome additional security cameras at Wooten? I certainly would. I will say for all of these specific investigations with the drawings of swastikas at school, cameras were never our investigation with the issue. In fact, the very last investigation that we did, they were such a help. Like we did have cameras to really help us here. So cameras were not necessarily, they were a benefit. They did not work against us where we would have needed more in investigating these cases. But again, I think schools could benefit from cameras. If we got more, I would take them. Now, when it comes to perpetrators, did we ever determine the perpetrators? In all of our investigations, what I would say is we very much had conclusions. I think we had a short list. But I will tell you, as I've worked on these over time, this is something that's really on my mind, and I'm not sharing something that I haven't taken back to my director. I think one thing that is a challenge in the investigations that we have conducted, as we have come very close, I believe, to identifying who the person is, and I can't say that it's the same person in these instances, but the most recent one that we did, where I believe we were very close once again, when we communicate the information, which we have to do, that's a part of this process, I think it really makes it a challenge to then figure out who actually did a drawing. So I think we were very close. And then we had, when I sent the communication to the community, again, something I think that we have to do, but once that information goes out there and the person who drew the swastika now knows that we know, we've really lost an element of surprise in the investigation, which I think is necessary to really figure out that a person did it. So I just want to paint that picture. It's a little bit of the experience when you're, an administrator working these investigations with your security team. So to answer the question directly, we did not get a perpetrator to admit that they did that, but I think that we were very close. And just part of the investigation process and the way that we communicate about this, that creates a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to investigate them. So you're trying to be very timely in how you communicate to your community, which is important, but then that also is not always a benefit to your investigation process. One thing I do want to finish on this note, Sally, because you brought it up, and I think that it is important. There's the specifics of the investigation and what we've been doing with all of these, but then there's also the programmatic planning that we're doing to make sure that we come back and continue to work on this. I mentioned earlier in some of my opening remarks where we're working on like hate bias and reporting and how students can reach out if they've experienced something like that. We're also moving forward with our plan to be a no place for hate school, which I know a number of MCPS buildings are. I really think that professional development wise and for training for staff, this is a step that we need to make. Summer is where we're going to plan all of that up. And I really do hope that we come back to a really clear picture of what our learning progression is for both staff and students when it comes to making sure that we're doing deliberate and diligent work on creating a place that's really beneficial to everyone. Another question about back to school night. I do not have the specific date yet on back to school night. We'll likely communicate that over the summer. Again, Wooten goes early, so it's generally some day within the first week of school or right after Memorial Day. So I would think right before Labor Day, right before Labor Day or right after Labor Day is likely our window for back to school night. Okay, so right now I've gotten to most of our questions in the chat. If there's any follow-up to the questions I've been responding to recently, if anyone wants to hop off mute and follow up, or if I got to everything in addressing your question, that's great. So just got a question. This is from NS. Can what to expect sessions be arranged for some advanced classes present by students who are already in the classes? It can be recorded and used year after year. So just to kind of talk this one back, the idea is that can students give their perception of like what you need to do to get ready, let's say an AP course, is that correct? Yeah, it's certainly an idea. Are there any specific classes that you were hoping would have some of these, like what to expect sessions? Just in general, yeah. It certainly sounds like one of those ideas that I would think RTs would want to look at. So every department has a resource teacher. So NS, could I request that if you wanted to explore that further, if I could get some of those details in an email and I could carry it back to just the resource teachers to think about if we were to do like what to expect videos that students could take a look at. I would really be interested in their thoughts about how we might do that, because it would essentially go back to their teachers in order to work with students to create them. Okay, and so Jessica, can I ask you, Jessica just wrote, I would love to see them for AP seminar and research, right? Understood. One thing though, I do see out of AP seminar and research is a lot of information, probably more than any other course in the building about those two courses in particular, because we have a program coordinator. So this is to build on, I guess, what Ms. Hanson shares. You're hoping to see students talk about it as well.
Yeah, just so the parents can brace for the number of group projects and things that are going to be going on outside of the school hours, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, at least, on what students are expected to do outside of hours.
Thank you for that. Okay. And then as thank you for following up with the email. I'll take a look at that, and then I can think of some people that it can go back to. Sally's question about graduation for next year. Okay, what can you remind us approximately when? So the graduation window is really consistent every single year. So graduations will begin right after Memorial Day. Seniors' last day is always the Friday before Memorial Day. So that'll give you a sense of when seniors will be wrapping up in 2024. And then what will happen is next year, sometime in November and December, generally an associate superintendent will come to the high school principals and they will present the graduation kind of timeline and expectations for that school year. And the high schools will be entered into a lottery. So everyone's school goes in and they literally draw names, and that builds the order in which the graduations will go. And so sometime around December, I'll have a sense of where Wootton will be in the queue, but we will not finalize. We'll have a tentative date and we'll not finalize well until, second semester where we really finalize and lock in our date. But I'll have a tentative date for 2024 sometime in and around winter break. All right, thank you everybody for the questions. We did a really good job in our chat questions today. Thanks everyone. Are there any others that you all would like to have addressed?
Hello.
Hi, Daisy.
Hi. I just want to say thank you to everyone again. I've been at Wootton since 2001, and my last child is graduating this year. So it's been a fun ride. The teachers are very supportive, and kudos to all of you, and a job well done, and continue to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Daisy. I appreciate that very much. And may I ask, did I give your daughter an award last night?
Yes, Zara.
Yes,
But,
congratulations to her. Yes, your name jumped out to me. Congratulations on her award last night. And I'm glad you had a wonderful time at Wootton.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that might bring us to our conclusion for this morning. For those of you that have come regularly to the coffee chats, I really do appreciate your engagement. I love the questions. I really feel like a forum like this, where not only can I impart information to parents so that you have it, I also really enjoy the fact that there are ideas nested in the questions that might come back to the school and might help us do our work better. So for both of those reasons, thank you all for staying engaged. If this is your first time showing up, please come back next year. If this is your last time being on the coffee chat, thank you for coming and spending your time. I really hope that you all have a great conclusion to the school year and summer, and we'll see you again in the fall, because we'll be, of course, doing coffee chats again. They're really, really helpful, and I can't wait to do it again. All right, thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.